What's going on, guys? So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different than normal. I'm just talking about some of the interesting things that I've been kind of finding out the more I dig into this, and that is that AGI is not coming, guys. And when we say AGI, we're talking about artificial general intelligence. It's this idea that, depending on who you ask, it's this concept that we're going to be able to achieve artificial general intelligence, or basically AI that surpasses human intelligence for most general tasks. And what we're starting to see is that's been a false promise. And I'm going to talk about kind of why and some of the history of this, right? So OpenAI has been dangling the carrot of AGI for years, but the promise is kind of fading pretty quickly. So even back just last year in 2024, Sam Altman was saying that AGI was going to come in 2025. But now in 2025, he is saying that it's not even a super useful term. And there are some reasons why he's saying that kind of makes sense. And other people have said similar things, in that it depends on who you ask how you even define AGI. So trying to achieve something that isn't even defined concretely is kind of problematic in and of itself. But what it does represent is a huge backstep from OpenAI and Sam Altman that AGI is even possible, no less possible in the year. So back in 2024, he also had said specifically, "We are now confident that we know how to build AGI as we have traditionally understood it," which kind of makes sense as to why he's saying now it's not even a good term. But it's kind of problematic, right? Because it's much more than an engineering problem as they suggested last year. Let me go to this article super quick. So again, back in 2024, he was claiming that in 2025, we're going to have machines that will be able to think like humans when AGI actually happens. Now here we have in 2025, and Sam Altman is now saying that it's not a super useful term. And like I said, he's not alone. And this article kind of talked through some of the things that I just spoke to. But what I want to get back to is why the hype even kind of to begin with. And the hype is always centered around one thing and one thing only. It's about sales and about marketing, because the promises of AGI pulled in a lot of money from investors and a lot of funding. Specifically, the partnership that OpenAI had with Microsoft was largely built on this pursuit of being the first to achieve the AGI milestone. OpenAI has been valued from 300, now looking at $500 billion as their valuation. That's a lot of money that they've been able to draw in. And part of it is because of this promise of achieving AGI. So sales and marketing, like all things. But it did have some usefulness, as in it kind of helped with imagination. It kind of set this North Star, something to achieve, something to go after that could really, really, really change the way we live and change humanity forever. But the reality is it's not going to happen, at least not for the foreseeable future. It will take decades to get there. And experts and scientists such as Yann LeCun, the chief AI scientist at Meta, is even saying he doesn't believe that we even have the technology to achieve AGI at this point. So let's talk about some of the things that are actually preventing us from achieving AI. And those things fall under both technical reasons and they fall under philosophical reasons. I'm going to start with the technical reasons. The first technical reason is because scaling is simply not helping, right? And when we talk about scaling, we can talk about from a data or from a compute perspective. Scaling either one of these, at some point, we see the performance start to plateau. And when you're talking about scaling compute, which could also mean the amount of time that models are using to process information, we can actually see that the models do worse. Okay, so let me show you this. There was an article that was released, largely led by the Anthropic team. You have fellows from Anthropic, you have some people from Scale AI. So a lot of really, really smart scientists and experts who did this study. And let me just help you read some of the beginning of the abstract, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about it. We construct evaluation tasks where extending the reasoning length of large reasoning models deteriorates performance, exhibiting an inverse scaling relationship between test time, compute, and accuracy. Our evaluation tasks span 4 categories: simple counting tasks with distractors, basically putting in distractions; regression tasks with spurious features; deduction tasks with constraint tracking; and advanced AI risks. And they identify 5 distinct failure modes. We're going to talk about the first 2. Number 1, Claude models become increasingly distracted by irrelevant information. So if you just put in a little hidden gem that has nothing to do with the ultimate question, it gets distracted and goes off on some tangent and hallucinates and just doesn't perform very well. The other thing that they found, the part two they found, was that OpenAI, the O series, they resist distractors. Not, Claude fell for the trap, but the OpenAI O series models resisted those same distractors. They overfit to problem framings, as in they kind of just like disguised it and pretended that they understood it and just took it further in the wrong direction. Because when you think about it, just logically speaking, if there's a 10-step process, let's think of the chain of thought. If there's a 10-step process to analyze and to think through a problem or a question, if you misunderstand it from the beginning and the first step that you do is wrong, like any math problem, and we all know this is actually just doing math. If you do the first step in the math problem wrong, the next 9 steps are going to also be wrong. And when you get to that final 10th step, you're going to have a wrong answer. That's just logic and just how it goes. So basically what this study is saying is that the longer time that a model has to reason, it actually performs worse, which is the opposite of what you would think. And it's a little bit counterintuitive. So that tells you right there why scaling from just a time and compute perspective isn't helpful. But there were also some similar studies that have been done that show that even if you continue to increase the amount of data that a model is trained on, at some point the performance plateaus and more data doesn't give you more performance. And you stack that on top of the idea that I believe ChatGPT-4 already had scraped and used 99% of public internet data to train itself, right? Or that's what it was trained off of, was most of the internet. So there's this open question of what other massive data source is available to make these models more intelligent and have more context and just understand more and recognize more patterns. And the fact is that that's when it comes into the physical realm, which is where AI, I think, is going to kind of pivot to. You're going to start seeing a lot more physical, real world use cases being focused on as we start to kind of reach this plateau of where we can get from just pure text, from pure data. And from, that perspective, I think we have to start looking at physical sources of data. So those are some big reasons as to why pure scaling from data or compute or time perspectives just aren't really getting us closer to AGI. And it starts to make you think, will we ever really get there? So now let's switch to, I guess, philosophically speaking. When you think about what these models can do, a lot of them still get confused. Like one of the examples that Yann LeCun, again, the chief AI scientist at Meta, he said was like, if a model read 20,000 years worth of reading or something to that effect, a model still would, if you told a model that A was the same as B, it wouldn't be able to tell you that B is the same as A. This is what we would call like common sense, which is really, really, really hard to teach. And that's why even we as humans among each other joke about, well, that's common sense, isn't it? Well, common sense isn't all too common. Like it's even common sense among us humans with true human intelligence can be, there or not there, depending on who you're talking to. And there's another really big piece of this philosophically as to why achieving AGI is going to be really hard. And that is that the large majority of like the way we interact with the world, the large majority of what we understand is like really subconscious. And it's like things that you learn even in your first couple of years of being alive, even maybe before you can speak. You learn certain things that are hard to translate into mathematical algorithms and hard to map to patterns. And everything that we know and how we operate isn't actually contained in internet data or any other textual based data set. And so it really has a lot to do with our experience of the world and how it works. And again, that's what we would refer to as common sense. There's no real good way to teach models common sense. And we saw this really exasperated with some of the earlier models where I think there was some example of like, they gave a model a situation like, oh, you're lost on an island and you have 3 things that you can take with you. What would it be? And it said something like a map and a flashlight and I don't know, something else random, but none of it was like things to start a fire with or clothing or protection or water purifier or anything like that. So it really just started to show that it doesn't understand common sense and essentially doesn't fully understand context. And without those things, I don't really see how you can start thinking about artificial general intelligence. So what will likely happen then? If we're not going to achieve AGI, then what will happen? Experts and myself, and I don't consider myself an expert, I do study this stuff, but it's believed that the direction will pivot more to, like I said earlier, physical AI implementations, right? In the physical world, taking in data, visual and audio data, and learning that way. The other way is it's going to pivot to specific use cases. So I believe you're going to see almost all of these companies start to focus on specialized use cases or niching down instead of trying to build these generally intelligent models, because we're already seeing, as we just talked through, there's a lot of reasons why that is looking very difficult to do, and more than likely it's not even possible with the technology that we have today. And this isn't just coming from me. Again, it's coming from the top AI scientists in the world are saying the same thing. So AGI may actually have been just a distraction this whole time, and we should have already been focusing on how do we leverage AI in more specific use cases and more specific industries. And that could be a very good thing, because now you don't need these large, very resource intensive models to do things, and we can focus on more specific edge type use cases in like manufacturing, and robotics and drones and things like that that are going to require some level of intelligence, but you probably could do a lot of that with smaller language models that are going to be less resource intensive. That's where I think things are going to head, and we probably should stop focusing on AGI and really just focus on these more specific use cases. And I think we'll get a lot more bang for our buck, and we'll see the industry of AI and how it impacts our world to continue to evolve versus this plateau that we're kind of seeing. One thing I didn't mention was, like, with this whole release of ChatGPT 5, for me, that's what really put the nail in the coffin on, like, we're hitting a plateau already. That's because the leap from ChatGPT 4 to ChatGPT 5 was incremental, whereas the leap from ChatGPT 3 to GPT-4 was exponential. So going from 3 to 4, huge difference. Going from 4 to 5, only a small difference, and only with specific use cases like math and code. That started to show that our progress is already slowing down when somebody like OpenAI is having trouble continuing to make these leaps and bounds. And I think you're going to see the same thing for all the other, big names, for your Anthropics, for your Metas, for Google. I think everyone is going to pretty much hit that same wall, and they're going to have to kind of pivot where they're focused on. But let me know what you guys think. What do you think? Has it all been hype, or have you been ahead of the curve? You already knew this, I bet. Let me know what you guys think in the comment. Am I off base? Where would you guys like to see AI go? Until next time, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.